accelerate action on adaptation from global, local, national, from the public sector to the private sector, and to make sure that we all learn from each other and work together for a climate resilient future. One of our most important programs is the Youth Leadership Program. The latest IPCC report shows that climate impacts are already impacting every region around the world. Young people are going to bear the brunt of climate change. So this is going to be your future, and we want you to be holding hands with us to develop and implement solutions on adaptations. GCA has two big programs on youth leadership. One is the partnership that we're doing along with the Ban Ki-moon Center for Global Citizens, and it is a particular training program for young leaders, young women leaders. It's a fantastic program, and I hope some of you are selected to be a participant in that program. I wish I had also had that kind of a training program when I was young. The second is a innovations challenge that GCA is putting together with the African Development Bank. And it is a contest for small and medium enterprises that have been in business for about 2 years in climate adaptation. It's going to be a fantastic opportunity, not only to showcase your program, but also to receive training and seed capital for the companies to even grow even bigger. But today's session is about gender. So I just want to share a few perspectives from my own background as a woman working in international development. I'm originally from Korea, and I joined the World Bank in 1992. To help privatize water companies. And in the early 90s, that was at the forefront of everybody's mind, public-private partnerships. So I worked everywhere in the world, East Asia, South Asia, Africa, Eastern Europe. Sometimes I actually had to look up on a map after my manager asked me to go to a country to figure out where was that country. But through all this hard work, I became the first woman director from Korea at the World Bank. And today I am speaking to you as director of GCA's global programs. One of the lessons that I have in my life is it's very important to learn about issues, but it's even more important to do something about them. In climate change, we often talk about the disproportionate burden of climate change on women and girls. I want all of you not only to learn about the disproportionate burden and the impact that it has, but more importantly, to become leaders in implementing climate adaptation action. We are in a climate emergency. Your voices and your actions matter. Thank you so much for your participation, and I wish you a great dialogue today.
Thank you very much, Jay, for joining us, and also for this key message. Become a leader to implement adaptation action. And let me also welcome all the participants and speakers. Today is the 4th Youth Adaptation Dialogue, and we are going to discuss the topic of gender, adaptation, and food systems. The Global Center on Adaptation is organizing this monthly youth dialogue to bring together experts and young people to showcase adaptation action. Today, we have also speakers from Nepal, Zimbabwe, and Bangladesh. Also, we have our young moderator, that is Emily Bernal, and who is one of the members of the Youth Adaptation panel that was launched last week, 2 weeks ago by the CEO of the Global Center on Adaptation. But also we have partner organizations. We are very glad to welcome the Climate Smart Agriculture Youth Network, the Ban Ki-moon Center, and also the Association of Students Working on Agriculture. Then I am very pleased also to welcome some remarks from Dr. Renata Tallarico. She's working in the United Nations Population Fund. Dr. Renata, the floor is yours. Please share with us some welcoming remarks.
Thank you very much, Adriana. And thank you everyone for joining us in this important session, really highlighting how the impact of climate change is seriously affecting the lives of women and young girls. We all know that we have high chances, unfortunately, more than 24%, the global temperatures will be reaching 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. And we also know that that will be a huge limitation vis-a-vis as achieving the Paris Agreement target. There are lots. What is important to highlight is that climate change is a multi-sectoral challenge, and is a challenge where no sector is immune from, which means that also issues related to sexual reproductive health are significantly affected by climate change. For instance, UNFPA indeed acknowledges the impacts of climate change and the fact that it will also undermine its transformative results. Some of you may not know, but the key transformative results UNFPA is really focusing on is ending preventable maternal deaths, ending unmet need for family planning, and ending gender-based violence and harmful practices. And climate-related emergency not only exacerbate existing health vulnerabilities and gender inequalities, but also cause major disruption to access to sexual reproductive health services, which are life-saving services. And I need to stress the fact that they are life-saving services, and climate change does impact on the ability of women and girls and young people at large to access them. We also know about how climate change obviously impacts on agricultural systems directly, and how food insecurity impacts on the ability of people to conduct their life with dignity and also to reach their basic needs, including their health needs. So clearly it's, from the few words I've said and what my colleague before was highlighting, it is clear how important it is to tackle climate change and come up with climate adaptation strategies that can help us in this process. Just to give for a little bit more data, if we look at the Malala Fund report, we know that climate-related events in 2021 will prevent at least 4 million girls in low and lower middle-income countries from completing their education, which allow me to say that is actually a tragedy. And we also know how much education is important in the lives of people in order for them to achieve the full potential, especially adolescents and young people. If we narrow it down to East and Southern Africa region, for instance, I'll give you one example on how climate change is impacting sexual reproductive health. In Malawi, an estimated 1.5 million girls are at risk of child marriage owing to the impact of climate change, including flooding and droughts, which has severely affected the livelihood of families and made it more difficult for parents to take care of their children, according to a report that was conducted in 2017. So you can clearly see how climate change indeed has, unfortunately, a negative impact on the sexual reproductive health of adolescents and young people. As UNFPA, our global strategy on youth and adolescents really calls for bolstering youth movements and working with youth-led organizations to expand possibilities for them and shape a more equitable, peaceful, and just future and present, let me add, through engagement at local, national, and global levels, including humanitarian and peace-building processes. And as part of this intent of UNFPA strategy on adolescents and youth, recently, we have established a joint youth working group on SRHR, specific on SRHR and climate change, which really brings together a strong network of young climate advocates and SRHR advocates from diverse backgrounds to cross-fertilize ideas from different youth networks, which are already existing across the region, but also across the globe. And the reason why we decided to do that is because it is important for us to appreciate the strengths of the two typology of networks. Very strong climate change, but also important to understand how that climate change challenges affect sexual reproductive health, and really engaging through the nexus in terms of humanitarian, peace, and development. Working closely with the joint working group, UNFPA ISARO came up also with a number of initiatives, and innovation is also an important concept when it comes to fighting climate change, or at least the results of climate change. And under the auspices of one of our programs called Safeguard Young People Program, we launched the Climate Hack Lab, which is a project that aims at empowering young people and offering them the opportunity to be really game changers on the front line and to fight the drivers of gender inequality in a gender responsive adaptation innovation manner. And I think that's very important also as we talk about youth-led accountability, as we talk about youth leadership, and we talk about climate change and sexual reproductive health. Let's never forget the importance of innovation and give young people the opportunity to express their ideas that are often the right ideas to be followed. But let me just conclude thanking you once again for this partnership and this dialogue. It's definitely, we are so excited to be present, and we're looking forward to hearing about everything that young people are doing to really work together and speak one voice, fighting climate change, looking at climate adaptation, and also making sure that gender equality becomes indeed a reality. Thank you very much all. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor, for these remarks and the key message that you gave us. Climate change is a multi-sectorial challenge, and we need to develop adaptation strategies that also recognize the needs of youth and women. Then let's continue with our agenda. And now we have our keynote speaker. Our keynote speaker is also working for UNFPA. She is Dr. Angela Basheri. Thank you for joining us. And please share with us the perspective about what is happening and what can we do. Over to you.
Thank you all for the invitation at this session, and what a terrific lineup of speakers and an interesting discussion you've really brought together today. So I would like just to spend the next minute to give you a little bit an overview of what we have done in terms of trying to find practical recommendation on how we can support gender sensitive programming and how can we support young people on their engagement. So I am Angela Bascheri. I'm the Regional Advisor on Population Dynamic at the Regional Office, and I co-lead for UNFPA, the Working Group on Climate Change. And over the last 2 years, we have tried to revamp the way UNFPA, the work UNFPA, and trying to strengthen the understanding of what are the programmatic action the UNFPA can put in place to strengthen our adaptation response, and how we empower young people and women on their action. So on the presentation today, I just want to tell you a little bit about the new evidence of the impact of climate change on women, then tell you about what UNFPA is, the program of work, the various pillars of work that we are doing. And then I thought it would be interesting for the conversation today, give you a summary of an evidence review that we have done, summarizing the nationally determined contribution of 50 countries in the first wave. And as you know, everyone is very climate conversed in this meeting, but as you know, the NDC are tools of the Paris Agreement. So we want to give you an insight of what we found, which identify recommendation and entry points for this engagement. Hopefully will help for the engagement in this session today. But as we know, the impact of climate change on so UNFPA works on maternal health, ensuring there's no unmet need for family planning, the reduction of GBV, and in the case of Africa, we also work on zero HIV infection. So there are specific areas of results that we work on, and there are a mounting evidence on how climate change impacts some of our outcome areas. Early on this year, there's been a large article from the Lancet that made a call to action and identified the direct and indirect impact of climate change on maternal health. And so the evidence is mounting, and it's clear that there are women and girls that are the most vulnerable, that were more impacted by these climatic changes. We also know that climate change affects the delivery of services, and the women and girls are the ones disproportionately impacted by access to services. We also know that during climate impact, gender-based violence or violence against women increases. So we wanted to really reflect what is UNFPA can do to ensure that considering the climate change is a major threat to the vision of sustainable development that we promote. We wanted to ensure that we also had the clarity on our programmatic action. And we came up with our, what we call a value proposition, which identifies specific areas of work the first area is pretty much in line with the topic of today's seminar. So in ensuring healthy and empowered population, empowering young people and women in their action. And of course, ensuring that the young leaders are active agents of society and participate in those processes. The second area of work is also sustaining and strengthening systems. So not just health system that might be impacted by climate, but also protection system. And the third area of work is around our work that we provide during emergency response. And UNFPA works a lot around data and vulnerability assessment. So we have an area of work related to that. And so why I tell you this is because it's important to reflect what each agency can propose and can offer in order to strengthen adaptation of the community more impacted and a subsection of the population more impacted. So this is what UNFPA is offering and is currently working towards. But I wanted to give you a little bit of insight of a review that we did using the nationally determined contribution of the first round of submission. And I get everyone knows what these NDC are. There are tools of the Paris Agreement, a document that summarizes the national action on climate and has a mitigation component as well as an adaptation component. So what we did an analysis. We look at how gender, health, population dynamic, the aspect of human rights or the consideration for vulnerable groups were addressed on those documents. And when we found that there is a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of supporting government and national system to make this link and ensuring that the gender sector response is inclusive of the impact that climate change has on women, as well as we also found that despite a lot of document as an element of gender, not very documented were clear about what we mean by gender programming and gender sensitive approaches. So this review gave us like kind of a number of entry points. I won't go into the detail, but it's available online if you are interested to know more. But essentially for us is making sure that we have a role to play to strengthen resilience and adaptive capacity of community. And that there is a clear role that young people has in this specific work. So in the process, we learn the importance of inclusion and representation at all level of the process of women, young people, and especially vulnerable group. And as a UNFPA, we are trying to facilitate that in our work in various areas. And then there is an opportunity to incorporate SRHR in climate impact to strengthen resilience of system. And of course, to ensure that the climate adaptation is right focus, gender sensitive and people centered. So I think this is kind of our clear role that we have of support. And young people have a clear opportunity. I think just echoing Renata opening remarks, there are specific work that they have a role to play, not just on the reviewing of the process, but also providing solution. And as I think Renata already outlined some of the work that we are doing with the youth working group. But I just want to say that this is a timely discussion and looking forward for further deliberation of today's seminar. So I'm going to stop here. Over to you.
Dr. Angela, thank you very much for this very comprehensive presentation and also highlighting the importance of the NDCs. And I think young people also can play an important role partnering with the governments, but other organizations for the implementation of the NDCs. Then, now to continue with the agenda, we are going to move to a Mentimeter, and I think that there will be a time also for questions and answers. Then I want to invite Emily Bernal. Emily is from the United Kingdom, and she was elected as one of the young leaders, member of the Youth Advisory Panel of the Global Center on Adaptation. Emily also has been working with UNFPA, promoting the topic of gender, advocacy, and adaptation. Then Emily, over to you to moderate this, the following session and also the question and answers. Please, over to you, Emily.
Thank you very much, Adriana. Yes, as Adriana mentioned, I am on the Young Advisors Youth Advisory Panel to the CEO and a member of the United Nations Population Fund Joint Youth Working Group on Sexual Reproductive Health Rights and Climate Change Adaptation. So this nexus is really important to me, and it's a pleasure to be with you all today. Before we move on to our question and answer and youth panel, we are going to do a poll to gauge all of your understandings on the topic that we're looking at today. So at the bottom of the screen on Zoom, there should be a button for the poll, which should go live now. So hopefully you can all see that. So the first question that we'd like you to answer is, what is your level of knowledge on gender-specific climate impacts? And second of all, have you been part of any gender-related climate projects or initiatives? So we've got all of our results coming in now. So we've got quite a spread here. Some people saying that they have lots of expertise on the topic and others who have no prior knowledge, which is fantastic, as we'll be hearing from a host of people all over the world, young leaders, youth leaders, as well as practitioners and experts in the field, about their best practices and solutions to integrate gender into adaptation. So that's fantastic. And we've got many people who've also been part of gender-related climate initiatives, which would be fantastic when we reach our Q&A later, and please feel free to join the discussion, input and ask any questions you have. So thank you very much for that. I believe now we will be moving on to hearing from our young panelists, our youth leaders who will be talking on the topic of gender and food systems. As Adriana has already noted, today is a youth adaptation dialogue. So in light of the Youth Adaptation Network, the newly formed Youth Advisory Panel, and the many other networks on gender, food and climate that are joining us today and listening in, we want to raise the voices and agency of young people on topics around the climate emergency that directly affect their futures and livelihood. Today, the world is home to the largest generation of youth in history, with 1.8 billion youth worldwide, with 90% of young people living in developing countries, often on the front lines of the climate emergency. Youth have the potential to bring new ideas and radical ambitions, which are required to develop adaptation solutions and implement them at a large scale. However, this requires recognition, meaningful inclusion and participation, and proactive financing from organizations and governments all over the world. So today we have the privilege of hearing from three of these young leaders, Tasnia Ahmed, Samir Tawali and Namandla, about how climate change is impacting women and girls or food systems in their region, and we will get to hear their solutions for innovative youth-led practices and gender-sensitive adaptation action. So first of all, I would like to introduce Tasnia Ahmed, who is a senior program officer at SRHR, Bangladesh. This is an organization that is youth-led and focuses on rights and development organizations. Tasnia works closely with the UNFPA Youth Working Group, advising on safeguarding sexual reproductive health rights in the face of climate change. So Tasnia, please would you tell us how climate change is impacting women and girls in the communities in which you work in Bangladesh, and perhaps tell us about the gender sensitive responses like sexual reproductive health rights and how these are important as an adaptation response. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily. Can you hear me? Okay, perfect. Thank you everyone who is joined with us, and of course make us more motivated about the work on youth adaptation and climate change. So I want to start my story with a word that is a Persian poet that Rumi has always said, that raise your voice, words not voice, because it's rain when flower blooms, not thunder. And this is really a very deep and programmatic issue when we are working with young people, especially on the more vulnerable areas, especially in climate affected area or even in climate migrated area in the slum areas. Because I have an experience in working with the climate affected people, especially on the reproductive rights on women, because when we are working on those factors, several kinds of issues has already sort out with these points. Because when we are talking about the young people, we have to be more focused on these equal issues, because sometimes young people are always in a way of tokenism, and these things also demotivated them in some cases, because when I started my work, I somehow I was felt that yes, I was demotivated, or my young groups are not in a high position or in a focused way, especially in different kinds of climate or coastal areas, because adaptation or imbalance was not there. And especially the rural women or adolescent girls are mostly affected, because in the part of gender equity or something making with the balance with the things, the men and women are not in the same age, because if there is any inequity, there we cannot make any balance or equality. So if we want to make a balance or equality, we have to make a balance in that case, and just we have to make a justice with everyone. So if we maintain this justice or equity in that a portion, we can also maintain a equality with everyone. So with my progress and works, I also made some problems, especially on the infrastructural gap or policy gap, because there is so much policies in our country, but the implementation size is not so lucrative. So that's why there are so many policies, so many rules, regulations, but the implementation point is really very vulnerable. And for those things, men or women are not getting the same equal or same vibe when they are actually praising their rights, especially in their health rights, education rights, or any kind of rights connecting to their daily life as well. And secondly, there was something that shortage of actual knowledge, because if there is no proper information or even the knowledge that we have to take to mitigate any kinds of misconception, we have to be more careful about our issues. And if men or women are not, and also the other groups of people like LGBTIQ people are not taking those points, it will actually make a misconception or misguided somehow themselves. So that also make it imbalance in the term of family imbalance, gender imbalance, or even the education imbalance for everyone. And thirdly, what I understand, that is collaborative approach. It's just an example that I can share you, that is I mean, government is doing their part, NGO is also doing their part, and INGO is doing their part. Look, these three things are working very individually, but if we are working in a same group with a collective approach, it will be a make more significant point with a very good elucidations, and that will also make a safe space for young people when we are actually talking about this adaptation. So I think this some a slight gap between the policy and the implementation side. So that is the point that we should must focus on those things. And lastly, about this decision making process, I started one line, that is raise your words, not your voice, because when I am talking something, my audiences are more make attention to me. So on that time, I have to be more sensitive when I am choosing my words, because voice could be positive or negative, but if I am taking my words perfectly, that is that it means that I have that voice to make my rights in the decision making process, and that will also make sensitize my policymakers. So if and this issue could be a climate change, then gender equality, reproductive life, or anything. But whatever, I believe that the words should be more cautious when we are talking about, and young people are always be on that perspective to summarize all their connectivity, and this will also make people on these things with the regarding. And last point I want to add, I will just finish up my things in just one month before we published one paper published in our good maker, that is climate change adaptation in a new chapter in Bangladesh. So in that chapter, we actually focused on several kinds of policy and and on the implementation gap that I have already focused on those things. So these parts are always missing in somehow. So I think these points should be covered more and more ignitely, so that the young people are always taking it positively and others are always make it supportive. So this capacity strengthening with the people and other lack of or even the dominating power can also be decreased. So yeah, Emily, that's for myself. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tasnia. That was some really inspirational words, particularly your point on raise your words, not your voice. And I think it's so important that policy does address and include all that are affected by climate change, including women and girls and their specific rights. Otherwise, we will end up with solutions that are imbalanced, one-sided, and ultimately ineffective in the face of the climate emergency. Thank you so much. Next, we will hear from Samir Tawali, who will be speaking more to the food systems side of the dialogue and discussion today, which is crucial in light of tomorrow's United Nations Food Systems Summit in New York. And we must recognise these crucial links between food systems and women, who are often most involved in the agricultural sector in many countries on the front lines of climate change. So Samir is pursuing an agricultural engineering degree in Nepal. He and his team are one of the top 5 finalists in the Queen Innovation Challenge, which was based around finding solutions to climate adaptation in the food system. And he is speaking on behalf of IAAS, the International Association of Students in Agricultural and Related Sciences. So Samir, we would like to talk to you today about why it's so important that young people are achieving gender-sensitive climate adaptation and resilience strategies, especially in the agricultural sector. And have there been any notable impacts and effects on livelihoods due to the effects of climate change in Nepal? So I'll hand over to you, and we're excited to hear from you and everything you have to say today.
Thank you, Emily. Are you hearing me?
Yes, we can hear you very well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited, and I was looking forward for this program, and it is quite far from my topic of my study, because as you tell, I'm an agriculture engineering student here in Nepal. But climate change is always the matter of youth, and I also had told that youth should think for themselves, so youth should think for climate change, because the youth is one who is going to live this world for longer than anybody else. I think than the older leader we have. So youth leaders will come out for the climate change, and I will going to start my word in the given guideline for me. I might not be the expert and scholar in the pure discipline of climate change and its various biological effect on human body, but I am from a country where the woman is treated as the machine for reproduction and the one who is responsible for all the household operations. In many regions of the country, still today, the women should have their meal at last or at the after of their male relative. The scarcity of food directly affects the woman in poor family rather than in male. I live in Kathmandu, the capital city, but after being the finalist of Queen Innovation Track, I got chance to travel many remote places of the country in these 2 months. And I have traveled to many Himalayan regions. The Himalayan region is one of the remote places in the Nepal. Everybody knows the beauty of higher Himalaya, but no one knows the hardness of people living there. In the research done in 2017 by Preeti Oli and the team here in Nepal, it was found that 64% of women use firewood for cooking purposes, and especially in the district of Himalayan region, the use of wood is must. There is more than 95% of women using firewood for cooking in Himalayan region now. Is the cooking by this firewood has its own effect, such as it causes nose and lung cancer for women. The smoke from the kitchen affects the environment of higher Himalaya, which is one of the most sensitive places for climate change. My visit to Jumla for a project of higher Himalaya made me speechless when I see the woman walking for miles for only water. So all of this discomfort shows that the climate change is directly or indirectly hampering the women. And it is happening more in developing and underdeveloped country rather than in developed country. As being the citizen of male dominating society, the steps for adaptation of the climate change are near zero. I am unable to notice any step taken for the welfare of sexual and reproductive health and its right. I am the finalist of Queen Innovation Track with the idea of zero energy cold chamber for apple storage. Apple farming is one of the leading professions of Jumla. Most of the male in this country, Nepal, are in foreign for employment and their study. But the women in the house are compelled to do the farming for their financial aid. And it is very sad to listen that the majority of apple get wasted due to post-harvesting losses. And in that place, the place name is Jumla, a higher Himalaya place. In that place, we doesn't find any sort of cold storage to store apple. And more than 52% of apple produced by the women of that region is getting waste every year. I can easily tell you that the organic apple of Jumla is one of the best and tastiest apple in the globe. I have already completed the feasibility test along with my team. And if we can put our idea into action, then many women can get job easily in apple farming and they will get financial aid by selling them. The zero energy cold chamber basically work on evaporative cooling and is the conventional way of cooling along with anomalous expansion of water. Thank you so much for this exposure, and I am very happy to talk in this sort of topic. So I think the word speak better, the action speak better than word in this topic. That means climate change. And in the country where I am living, it is most probable that if a woman doesn't give birth to a baby, then his husband simply left her and she is already almost jobless and financially very weak. So I think we should think about the climate change and its adverse effect on women in South Asia and especially in Nepal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Samir, for your insights from Nepal and from your recent travels. It's so interesting to us all hear the disproportionate burden of climate change in these regions, particularly on physical health, household dynamics, sexual reproductive health rights. And it's fantastic for us to hear your really innovative solutions, so inspiring on the way that you can take this apple industry and women's agricultural jobs and turn it into a way that's more sustainable and is creating opportunities for women instead. So thank you so much for your insights, and we'll have a later Q&A if anyone would like to direct any further questions towards Samir. We're now going to move on to our final youth speaker, who is Namandla. Namandla is a young researcher with Restless Development Zimbabwe for the Young Changemakers on Climate Change and Health project. Namandla has worked with young women and girls in her community as she strives to see women and girls claiming their rights and being able to express their voices in a highly patriarchal society. She has raised awareness on sexual, gender-based violence and harmful practices that are done in communities and around the world, with many of these practices going unreported. So Namandla, we would like to hear, what climate change impacts do you see on girls and women in Zimbabwe? And what are young people, why are young people important to achieving gender-sensitive climate adaptation and resilience strategies, including protection from gender-based violence and sexual reproductive health rights? So Namandla, I'll hand over to you, and we're excited to hear from you. Thank you very much.
Hi, thank you, Emily. I hope everyone can hear me. If not, please just raise your hand and then I will turn off my microphone or just make some changes. Thank you again for this platform. I'm very happy to be in a panel of people who understand living in third world nations, or who understand living in a developing country, and who understand patriarchal systems and how our societies are varied from more developed countries. And I'd like to say that from what the previous speakers have spoken about, some of the issues are actually quite similar. I'll point out to the fact that women have to walk long distances just to go and fetch firewood, like Samir has even alluded to in his previous remarks. And with the increasing climate change effects that we're noticing, you find that women are the ones who are walking these longer distances. And it's affecting women and girls mostly because they're the ones who are at home whilst men are joining the workforce. It's something that is still happening relentlessly in our country. And from my situation and what I've found, a lot of people are having a lot of climate migration where they are moving from the rural settings, because a lot of farming used to occur in the rural areas, and people are moving from the rural settings and they're moving into cities. And because of that, a bigger load and a bigger burden is being left on women. Now women are taking up things that they never used to take up. For instance, there were things like cattle ranching, cattle farming, and the grazing of the land that men used to be in charge of, but now women are also at the forefront of that. So it's the burden of what they were already doing and the burden of what the men who have migrated to look for bread and butter to feed their families because of the economic situation. Because of that, women are left doing all these extra duties also at hand. Now, I'll take a look even at one of our case studies in Zimbabwe, which is a very lived experience, which was one of the recent cyclones that we had about 2 years ago, which was Cyclone Idai. And Cyclone Idai, we lost a lot of people, and it was very, very sad. And you find that things that relief workers were supposed to be doing, people who get hired to do this job of relief, definitely we need volunteers, right? But there are people who also are on the ground and are doing those things. And the people who are taking care of the sick, the people who are just taking away gravel, taking away rocks, and burying other people even because of the effects of climate change, the people who are doing that are women. And this is happening with no compensation whatsoever. And it's happening on each and every single day. Now, you think that Cyclone Idai is something that maybe it's happened once off, and we're working towards strategies. Obviously, as a nation, we're working towards strategies that we can implement if such things continue to happen. However, it's something that is happening each and every single day in different and various communities, where you find that women are in the fields, women are out there, they are trying to source out finances for their families. They're trying to take their kids to school using the money that they get from planting and plowing the land. But there's a lot of unpaid labor. There's a lot of skewing already in workplaces where men generally get higher wages. And that is happening also even in the agricultural and food sector. And so it's a problem that really needs us to address in a way that I'm grateful for this dialogue, where it is very gender sensitive, where we realize that women are also at the forefront of this, and women are the ones who need to be taking a front seat, even in coming up with ideas and implementing things that will bring solutions to the table. Because if we're going to have a bunch of people who are not working in the field, a bunch of people who are not fetching water from very long distances, if those are the people who are coming up with policies that even were alluded to by our first speaker, when she was talking about our policies not being implemented, that they're there, but they're not being implemented, that is one of the reasons I'd like to believe is because the people who are coming up with those policies are not the people who are mostly affected by what is happening around climate change. So if we have women, if we have young people at the forefront of that, it'll be very, very, very much beneficial. Look, I come from a country where there's a 90% unemployment rate. I come from a country where we are in a continent that has 60% of the population as young people. So if 60% of the people are young, then they must be the ones who are taking positive actions, who are taking positive actions towards change, who are taking positive actions towards this dialogue, such as the ones we're having today. And I believe that we already have a gap where in other nations or in other places, very young children at very, very young ages are learning about this. Maybe probably as early as elementary and primary school. But you find we start talking and having conversations around climate change when someone is in their youth and their teenage years. That's when people start learning about garbage disposal. That's when people start learning about deforestation, afforestation. That's when people start understanding even about the ozone layer and its depletion. But knowing is not enough. Having an idea is not enough. We need to do something. We need to make change. And one organization is not enough, which is why I'm happy that there are many organizations which are here today, which just goes to show that if we continue doing something here and there, all of us, one way or another, hopefully, we will actually get to a place where we might have two generations, definitely, and work towards. And just going back to the issue of young people at the forefront and women with increased duty of care and all that note, and coming up with that, I'm happy to be part of an organization and a research project that we are focusing on climate change and human health. So this project it's still at its infancy stage, where we're still just trying to understand knowledge gaps. We're still trying to understand what more we can do. We're still trying to understand who we can involve. Because I think someone actually also alluded to the same fact that there are people involved, there are people who know, but it's as though we're looking up to a savior, but no one is coming to save us. We need to save ourselves. And for that to happen, women, young people, we need to be at the So the project that I'm part of, I'm actually quite happy and quite excited that 65% of the young researchers who are in the project and all of us are young people to continue to see this through. Now, what will it be like in 20 years? But we will have left something behind. And I think that's what's important. What's important is for us to start taking action. What's important is for us to realize that no one is going to take action for us. What's important is for us to realize that we can cry foul all we want, but we need to actually do something about it and take up certain space. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Namanda. Those words was truly inspiring. And I think you're very right. Young people and women and girls, those who are directly affected at the forefront and those with the on-the-ground knowledge must be the ones taking the front seat to drive this positive action. But they require the support, recognition, and crucially the financing to lead in this capacity and on these initiatives from the types of organizations who've all gathered here today to support this important dialogue. So thank you very much. And I'm sure we'll have many more questions directed towards you because you made some crucial points about the role that women and young people need to play as the key people affected and on the front lines of this climate emergency. So the next point in our agenda is we will now hear responses from our keynote listeners. So now that we've heard from our three inspirational young leaders from different regions affected by the climate emergency and its impact on gender, women and girls and food systems, we will invite some keynote listeners to give their remarks and their next steps as to what can happen to implement this in practice and in action. So first up, we will hear from Viola Christian, who is Programme Officer at the Ban Ki-moon Centre for Global Citizens, on her thoughts and what are the next steps in achieving gender-sensitive and youth-led adaptation action. So thank you, Viola, over to you.
Thank you so much, Emily. I can only say what a privilege it is to speak to you today. I feel the energy really from our youth speakers, especially. Today is a day where I'm just like, I love my job. Being surrounded by young people like you who really are change makers for climate change and for climate action, and who really make sure that the gender focus is maintained when it comes to climate adaptation is really, I feel so privileged. to give some remarks about what has been said, because some things really resonated with me and with the Ban Ki-moon Center. The Ban Ki-moon Center itself is an organization that works internationally and globally for the empowerment of women and also youth, for them to also take their role as change makers and to be active for the Sustainable Development Goals, but also for to really make a change as a global citizen. And what we were just hearing is exactly that. Having this mindset of it's not just me who is in a role to take action, but it's me who it's us who have to make a change for the entire future generations. It's not just about us at this moment, but it's about years to come from now. And so I think that is a very important point, and I feel like a lot of you have been kind of addressing this issue, that especially when it comes to women empowerment and gender, the gender focus on climate change and climate action, we need to make sure that actions are being implemented, that it's not just hot air that is coming from policymakers and decision makers, high level, but that it's really implemented on the ground. And I think that really community-based adaptation is really the concept that we need to foster in that context. Our previous speaker impressed me so much in what you said, Namandla, in what you said about it's necessary that we have this practical application on the ground, and that it's not just coming from the decision makers, but also implemented on the ground. And I think these gender sensitive factors, that we know about them is one thing, but really applying them and really having the skills to work on the ground to implement something that is really sustainable for the entire community is another. And I think that's where we also come in as the Ban Ki-moon Center. Our goal is really to make sure that young people also have these essential skills, this essential skill set to make a change. And I think talking about climate solutions and climate activities, it's something that is very hard to define. But what we try is to make sure that young people have the mindset of identifying where change has to take place, and where climate adaptation can foster really a sustainable solution for an entire community. And so I just want to highlight, for example, a recent, our newest program, our new online executive program that works for women leadership on the topic of climate adaptation is really speaking to that point. It's on the one hand putting together the knowledge of climate adaptation and the gender sensitiveness that it has to be, but not only that, it also, we try to combine it and put it together with leadership skills. And that's where I really want to focus on this topic of leadership. I mean, what is it if we don't include women, young women in leadership positions? How can we, push for what we're asking for if young women aren't part of the solution and part of being leaders in decision-making processes? So having these women equipped with, having us young women equipped with these skills is essential if we want to promote these ideals and these topics that we really want to push for. And so what we bring into this online executive training that we now just launched is this leadership skill set, project management, negotiation skills, how important it is to raise a woman's voice at the negotiation table. I mean, it's undeniable that this is something that is needed, that is desperately needed. And I just want to encourage you, all of you. I mean, I'm so happy that I have this audience here to really check it out, because I think that this is also something that you can maybe take into your communities. Maybe you can take lessons how leadership skills can be transferred to young women, how different knowledge skill set about gender sensitive climate adaptation can be also brought to your community, and maybe take some of these lessons and maybe share them among your community. But this specific executive training is now targeting especially young women from African countries. But I'm happy to put in the link here, and I will stop here. But thank you so much for all your inspiration, and I'm just very fortunate to be among you.
Thank you so much, Viola. I think you had a wonderful key message there on the importance of fostering community-based adaptation and the Ban Ki-moon's key role in building capacity and leadership skills for young people, and in particular young women. And thank you for raising the opportunity of your upcoming leadership course. So thank you very much for that. We now have another keynote listener who is going to be giving a response. So I'd like to invite Divine Tiakam from the Climate Smart Agricultural Youth Network to provide a response on the panel discussion we have just had. So over to you. Thank you very much. Divine, just checking if you have connection and whether you can hear us. Okay, we can come back to hear Divine's intervention and response in just a second if we manage to regain connection. So for now, I would like to move on to our Q&A section, where we will be able to direct our responses towards any of our panelists today, our youth speakers, our youth speakers, our keynote speaker, our keynote listeners. I do know that Angela, I think, has to leave for another meeting very soon. So if anyone has any questions to direct towards her, please do those first. And yes, I now would like to invite you to either put your questions in the chat box or raise your hand if you would like to direct a question. We can begin with the question we've had submitted from Dr. Sarada, which is to all panelists. So if anyone would like to come in and answer this, and they were asking about, is there any concrete data about how many women and youth understand about climate change and its effect in real sense? So maybe that's about understanding on the ground and about how we can use this understanding to drive more effective action. So if anyone would like to answer this question, please feel free to take to the floor. Perhaps I could ask you, Namandla, about understandings within the communities you work in, and how that understanding is helping to drive action.
All right, thank you so much. That's a very good question. Yes, there are some concrete responses that we've found so far. So like I said in the beginning, that we are working on a project in its infancy stage. However, we yet to bring out the reports about it. Restless Development has, however, made other similar reports and findings, for instance, in Uganda that they did. And what we've realized is, when we were taking the information, we're focusing mostly on youth. We're focusing mostly on young people as a whole. So there is data on that, but I'm not yet able to release all that information as of yet, because we're yet to actually come up with a compiled response as to that. But you can view some of our previous reports. I will actually send in a link for that.
Thank you very much, Namandla, and that link would be fantastic. Would anyone else like to ask a question? Please feel free to raise your hand if you do have a question.
Emily, I think that Divine is already with us. Divine, can you hear us?
Perfect.
If so, please take the floor.
Yes. I want to thank you all. Thank you, GCA entire team for giving us this opportunity. In fact, I heard from the young people, I got 3 different key messages. The first thing is capacity building. The second thing is policy formulation and the political will. So what I want to say here is that young people actually should be looked upon as development partners and not as beneficiaries. That's the first key message. And women being at the forefront of climate crisis, when we have climate stress, environmental crisis, women are at the forefront because find a woman who is actually pregnant. So they're actually vulnerable, young people and women. But one of the adaptative measures where we are actually working closely at the level of CSAYN is tree planting. And we've been able to ensure that young people plant fruit trees, which has a symbiotic activity or benefit, whereby the fruit trees in years to come, they can grow up to become somehow tangible for them to sell to companies who produce juice. And equally, they can help these rural women to send their children to school. But this discussion is coming at the time where we are looking forward to the UN Food System Summit tomorrow, which is actually a people summit and a solution summit. It's a solution summit because it's going to address the climate crisis, it's going to address the earth crisis, and then equally the issue of cooperation has to be somehow underpinned, and as well as compassion. So you come to realize that we have 4 C's, we have climate, COVID, compassion, and then collaboration, cooperation. So looking at what the GCA is doing, we actually feel that it is really, really important. And it's a people summit because we're going to end hunger by 2030. This summit is going to enable us to end hunger by 2030. And looking at young people and women, they're actually at the forefront because young people right now are so passionate about cultural systems. And that's why the food system transformation has actually been given an environment to young people summit. And I feel that if we get our rulers, I'll actually interest other because we usually forget that. Because so what do we do as this year to make sure that we empower this right? Because they don't have access to internet. Is that the whole process? That's very, very important because some of people at the rural communities, they don't know local, they don't know English and French, so we need to translate some of these policy documents into and that's where I will really underscore the fact that the national implementation and adaptation plans account for the most marginalized communities can have access to strengthening and policy reformulation is really achieving SDGs by 2030. The leaders of young people at the center want to see women at the center. And of course, person with disabilities equally at the center of the summit. And that's why we think the summit is very, very timely. So I thank you very much, Adriana and your team for setting this meeting up.
Thank you very much, Divine. I'm just going to look towards Adriana and see if we have any more time for our Q&A, as I appreciate we are running slightly over time, or whether we will now move to our closing remarks. So Adriana, I'll just look to you for this.
Maybe just let's take one question more and then we move because we are over time. Then let's go.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So I see we've had a question submitted from Ivan, who asks, what strategies and opportunities are in place to engage the local communities and track the progress in the implementation on the already identified measures? So we can direct this towards anyone who would like to answer, whether that's our keynote listeners or our youth speakers. I know, Tasnia, you obviously spoke to the importance of implementation, so perhaps you'd like to take this question.
Okay, thank you, Emily. So I want to, as we are running out of time, I want to make just 3 points. That is your participation in the decision-making process when it's rural or even the urban, any type in the places. Secondly, mobilization of the policymakers more, because we have to do advocacy again and again so that they are going to be sensitized and focus on this issue connecting to the young people and adolescents, especially on the topic of climate adaptation, gender equality, and reproductive health, these things. And thirdly, about to making so much connectivity, outreach connectivity activities, especially in considering the COVID-19 situation, because people are mostly working in the home, so they are not actually working in some field level. So we have to do something motivated, something especially in the ICT based work, so that people are more covered, more collapsed, and working with the things and even the policy level and even on the community level simultaneously. Yeah, Emily.
Thank you very much, Tasnia. Unfortunately, as we are now running short on time, we'll have to call close to the Q&A session there. But it's been fantastic to see everyone's energy and enthusiasm and participation today, and I'm sure we can continue the conversation offline within our networks. Samir, Namandla, and Tasnia have really exemplified the potential for fantastic youth-led gender transformative adaptation action and its potential in adapting our world and securing a resilient, just and green future for all, including women and girls. I'll hand over to Adriana now, and thank you all for joining, and she will make the closing remarks.
Thanks. Thanks a lot, Emily, and a special thanks also to all the speakers, to also the partner organization, and to all the participants. The Global Center on Adaptation established the youth dialogues as a platform to bring together young experts, but as well decision makers and organizations. And I also joined this, the message of Viola, that basically is encourage you to continue working, because you are change makers, you are making a transformation at the local, national, and international level. And what we need is to inspire more people to raise awareness, to develop skills and knowledge, and you can be the bridge. You can be the ones that go into your communities, schools, universities, and empower them to take adaptation action according to the local circumstances. I would like to invite you to also join the Youth Adaptation Network. Currently, we have members in over 130 countries, and we will include there on the chat the link where you can be part. Also, we this year launched the global call to action. Basically, young people from all over the world made this call. And what we want to do is invite you to help us to implement the global call to action. There will be different events taking place. We will have the Youth Adaptation Dialogue in October, November, December, training opportunities. Then please join us and continue helping us to mobilize adaptation solutions. And I would like to invite everyone to turn on your camera and then to celebrate this very inspiring dialogue with a family photo. Then if you don't have your camera on, please feel free. And also here you can see in the chat how you can join the Youth Adaptation Network. And also we have a monthly newsletter where you will receive news about us, our activities, and also opportunities for young people. Then I think that a special thanks also to the team that has been supporting the organization of the dialogue, Josh, Lynn, and all the people supporting that, and to all the partner organizations. Then I will hand over to Josh to take the family photo. Josh, over to you.
Okay, everyone. Thanks. So if you can get your videos on, that would be very helpful. We still have some faces to see. Great, great. Good to see familiar faces and new faces. Thanks a lot for putting it on. So on my count of 3, we're gonna have it. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, perfect, perfect. All right, thanks a lot. Yeah.
And thank you very much, everyone. Have an excellent day. And looking forward to seeing you very soon at the next Youth Adaptation Dialogue that will take place in October. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Cheers, cheers.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. And join us as member of the Youth Adaptation Network and also the different opportunities that the Global Center of Adaptation is offering to youth.